folks were pressing to use these boosters, and they were pressing the FDA for special permissions. And this was like, you got to be careful here, right? So also in the news this week is the development that an advisory group for, the FDA recommended putting these COVID vaccines and boosters on the schedule of approved vaccinations for children. Now, as you might imagine, it's caused great consternation and controversy. The concern is by putting those controversial treatments on the approved vaccine schedule, it will make it easier for states and localities to require vaccinations of children. It doesn't guarantee that the mandates will occur, but it makes it easier for the mandates to occur. And not only that, makes it potentially legally more difficult to challenge such mandates because of the blessing that the corrupt FDA has given to this controversial COVID vaccine program and treatment protocol. Now, Judicial Watch, again, has been a key leader in investigating the COVID scandals, where the COVID disease came from, the lies and misdeeds about by Fauci as it relates to China and COVID and all of that. We've investigated gain-of-function research, exposed pretty much everything what you know about gain-of-function research. We proved that Fauci was lying, it looks like, about gain-of-function research. So that's pretty clear. We've also gone to town in asking for and suing for records as it relates to the development of the vaccines. And we keep on getting documents, so many documents, you know, they may seem overwhelming in number, but I encourage you to look at them because if we didn't have them, you wouldn't know about it. I mean, these vaccines are the most important drug developed in arguably the history of the modern world. And yet we have to sue to get basic information about how they came to be and how they were evaluated. We have two lawsuits that have just extracted more documents from the government. We had a lawsuit against the FDA for records of these two individuals who essentially left the FDA because the FDA was moving to approve boosters despite these individuals not thinking they were really needed or put on a timeline that they thought was more of a political timeline than a public health related timeline. So that's the way these vaccines have been approved. There's been all these political back and forth. We've proven it with these documents. Now we have these new documents that show in this lawsuit that we just received, we received 43 pages of heavily redacted records regarding the COVID vaccine. So we sued under the Freedom of Information Act for records of the communications from the former director and deputy director of the FDA's Office of Vaccines Research and Review, Dr. Marion Gruber and Dr. Krause. They were, again, among a group of resigning doctors who agreed that available evidence, this is a quote, doesn't yet indicate a need for COVID-19 vaccine booster shots among the general population. And that was from September of 2021, all the way back in September 2021. In July of 2021, there was an email that we uncovered as a result of this lawsuit to an individual whose name is redacted, so we don't know who it was sent to. So what's interesting is we asked about these specific doctors and got additional emails as it relates to this really intense pressure campaign to get these boosters out there. There's a July 2021 email, where they were talking about folks and warning people about using these boosters in essentially an experimental fashion. It's under this investigational new drug exemption, which folks were looking for the ability to use these boosters. And one of them said, in kind of setting up a description of how to deal with this, vaccines which are available under the Emergency Use Authorization may be considered lawfully marketed if used under the scope of authorization as described in the letter of authorization for each product. Now this is the key part. Note that an important consideration is the possible risk to subjects, so please clearly identify the intended study population and include a discussion of the issue from your perspective. So what was going on is that folks were pressing to use these boosters, and they were pressing the FDA for special permissions, and this was like, you got to be careful here, right? So what's interesting here, there's this other set of emails from, it looks like a medical entity that had patients that had already been vaccinated that were immunocompromised, and they wanted permission to, quote, conduct a study to give them the booster. And the FDA was under the gun here because they really didn't have a good feel for what was going on with this study. And if you want to, and this is kind of the smoker or the kicker in the email, and you can look at it's only 45 pages, so download it and look at it. So someone writes, we currently have a few immune-compromised patients in our ICU who are fully vaccinated. It is difficult to remain patient when we are on the front lines observing this happen. We'd like to initiate a third dose boost as soon as possible on our most vulnerable patients. Is there any way to expedite this request? So someone says, well, can't we just get a verbal okay from so-and-so? And that's in response to someone who wrote, Mr. Krause, who we talked about here, he wrote, but it doesn't sound like they actually want to do a study. They just want to vaccinate these people, if I'm reading this correctly. I mean, isn't that crazy town? That's what the FDA was dealing with. And it's not clear what happened here, but this booster thing is a disaster in terms of confidence, public confidence, in how it's been handled. And I know there's, all this controversy about potential mass vaccination of children for these COVID shots. But when you see how they handled it for adults, you're going to see where this controversy came from. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.